Welcome back. How long have you been watching my channel? Let me know below.
I never wanted to be at that dinner. The truth is, I almost didn't come, but then my mom called me 3 times in a row, which she never does unless someone's dead or someone's pregnant. This time it was the latter, and the way she said it on the phone, chirping like a cheerleader on her third mimosa, "Jason has something to tell everyone." Well, I knew my presence wasn't exactly requested, so much as it was expected, so I showed up. Black dress, chipped nail polish, a bottle of Pinot I picked up on the way from a gas station that also sells bait. Nobody noticed. That's just the way it's always been. Jason walks into a room and everyone turns to listen. I walk in and someone uses my head to balance their purse. That's not self-pity, that's just inventory. A lifetime of being the background music to someone else's highlight reel. They had the dining room all set up like it was Thanksgiving in a damn catalog. Fancy plates, gold-rimmed glasses, a floral centerpiece that probably cost more than my week's groceries. I stood there for maybe a minute before my mom swooped in and kissed the air next to my cheek. "You made it," she said like I'd just survived a war. "You look tired." "Thanks," I muttered, handing her the wine. She looked at the label and then placed it down like it was a wet rag. Well, it's the thought that counts. Jason walked in next, all polished up in a navy sweater and that wide, charming grin that never failed to get him what he wanted. And Chelsea, his wife, walked beside him like she'd just stepped off a yoga retreat brochure. That woman always looked like she was posing, even when she was just chewing. They were glowing, and I already knew before a word was said. My mom stood and tapped her glass with a butter knife, the room quieting instantly. "Family," she said, raising her arms like a Baptist preacher. "Jason and Chelsea have an announcement." There it was, the big moment. Everyone leaned in. "We're having a baby," Jason said, his eyes flicking to Chelsea, then around the room like he was waiting for applause. He didn't have to wait long. Clapping, cheers. My mom actually teared up. She stood and hugged Chelsea so tight I thought her spray tan might rub off. Dad said something like, "Another little all-star on the way." And someone from Chelsea's side, her sister maybe, yelled, "I knew it!" like she'd cracked a mystery. Meanwhile, I just sat there, smiling like a hostage in a birthday hat. I wasn't angry, not yet. Not until what came next. The clinking stopped and I cleared my throat. I actually have something to share too. My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to turn a few heads. I hadn't planned to say anything, but after watching them get treated like a pair of royal fertility gods, I thought maybe, for once, I could take up a sliver of space. My mom looked at me, not kindly, not warmly. She didn't even really look at me. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "Honey, let's not distract from the real celebration." And just like that, the air left my lungs. I nodded, said nothing more. Chelsea smiled politely and patted her belly, already taking the next question from someone across the table. And I just sat there, swallowing a dozen words that would never matter anyway. They didn't want to hear about the new project I launched, or that I finally paid off my student loans, or that I'd been quietly struggling with insomnia for 3 years and just had my first full week of sleep. None of it meant anything next to a fetus. Dinner moved on. I sipped my wine and listened to Jason talk about nursery colors and Chelsea list baby names like she was reading from a Pottery Barn catalog. I said nothing, didn't even look at them, until a woman in scrubs walked into the dining room holding a manila folder. She looked around confused, her eyes scanning the group until they landed on me. "Hannah?" she asked. I blinked. "Yeah?" She walked over and handed me the folder. "Sorry to interrupt. The ultrasound report was labeled urgent. I figured you might want it sooner rather than later." The room went silent. Chelsea's mouth opened a little. Jason's face dropped like someone had just pulled a fire alarm. My mom's brow furrowed, and she half stood. "Excuse me, what is this?" The nurse looked uncomfortable. "This is Hannah, correct?" she asked me again. And I nodded slowly, still staring at the folder now in my lap. Chelsea grabbed Jason's hand so fast it looked rehearsed. I could feel every eye on me. I flipped the folder open slowly, my fingers suddenly ice cold. Inside were black and white images. Grainy, clinical, unmistakable. Ultrasound. But I hadn't had one. I hadn't been to a doctor. I looked at the top right corner. Patient, Hannah Morris, pregnancy status, viable embryo, first trimester. My heart started to pound. "This isn't mine," I said, my voice low, stunned. The nurse looked confused. "I'm just the courier. That's the name I was given." Chelsea made a small choking sound and covered her mouth with one hand. I looked across the table, my eyes locking on hers, and that's when I saw it. A flicker of something in her face. Not surprise, not confusion, but fear, raw, cold, bone-deep fear. And I realized this wasn't a mistake. Something was very, very wrong. And I had just been handed the first piece of it. For a moment, no one moved. The kind of silence that hangs heavy over a room, not out of peace but panic, settled over the table. Forks were halfway to mouths, wine glasses frozen midair. My mother's expression locked somewhere between suspicion and denial. Jason kept his eyes on the folder, while Chelsea stared at me with a look I couldn't quite name yet, somewhere between horror and guilt. Like a kid caught holding matches while the curtains are already on fire. I didn't open the folder again. I couldn't. My hands were trembling just enough to betray me if I tried. But I didn't need to see it again. I'd read the top of the form, seen the ultrasound print, felt the gravity of that name printed neatly across the paper. Hannah Morris, my name, no middle initials, no clerical mix-up. It was me. The nurse, clearly realizing she'd dropped a match into a gas leak, awkwardly stepped back and stammered, I'll just let you folks discuss. I was told to deliver this directly. That's all." She backed out of the room, her white sneakers squeaking across the hardwood floor, leaving behind only that manila envelope. Simple, quiet, devastating. Jason stood slowly, trying to collect himself. "There's obviously been some kind of error," he said, looking around the table like he was hoping someone else would speak before he had to. "Hannah, maybe you should go call the clinic or something. It's probably just a filing mistake." It sounded plausible enough. But Jason had always been good at sounding plausible. I tilted my head slightly and met his eyes. "A mistake where an ultrasound and medical files were printed with my full name? That kind of mistake?" Chelsea jumped in too fast. "Well, there are lots of Hannah Morrises, aren't there? I mean, come on, it's not that uncommon of a name, right?" She was practically vibrating. I'd never seen her rattled before. Normally she was composed, smooth, polished. This Chelsea had cracks in her voice and blotches rising on her perfect skin. And then my mother, bless her cold little heart, cleared her throat and turned to me with a calm, clipped voice. "Hannah, maybe this isn't the right time to get into whatever this is. You know how sensitive Jason and Chelsea's pregnancy is. Let's not make it about confusion or drama." There it was, the playbook in action. I wasn't shocked, just exhausted. Somehow, even when I'm the one getting handed a damn medical file with my name on it in the middle of someone else's baby announcement, I'm the one being asked not to make a scene. I'm the one being told to step back, shut up, stay small, like always. But something was wrong. Something was so deeply, unforgivably wrong. I took a breath. "I'm not pregnant," I said finally, holding the folder gently like it might explode if I moved too quickly. "I haven't been to a doctor. I haven't had sex in longer than I care to admit, let alone gotten an ultrasound." My father, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, his voice low and wary. "Maybe we should all take a step back. Let's not jump to conclusions." It was Chelsea's turn to falter. I think I need to sit down," she muttered, and lowered herself onto the edge of her chair, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. She looked pale. That fake, powdered confidence she always wore like makeup was slipping fast. Jason leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Her eyes darted to mine. She nodded. And then she said it softly, but just loud enough that I caught it. She wasn't supposed to know. It was like someone dropped the floor out from under me. I looked at her directly. "What did you just say?" She shook her head quickly. I didn't mean I just meant this isn't how it was supposed to come out. Come out, my voice cracked, not with volume, but disbelief. What wasn't supposed to come out? Jason tried to cut in. Hannah, let's talk in private, okay? This is a family matter. Yeah, I said louder now, rising to my feet. It is, so maybe someone should tell me what the hell is going on. Chelsea buried her face in her hands. Jason reached across and grabbed her wrist. My mother looked at both of them like she was seeing something she didn't quite want to understand. It was the first time I'd ever seen her uncertain. Then Chelsea dropped her hands from her face and spoke, shaking but clear. I couldn't get pregnant. We tried everything, the IVF, the shots, the hormones. Nothing worked. My body just wouldn't, nothing stuck. I was losing my mind. And Jason was, well, he was running out of hope. She glanced at him and he looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. So we started looking at donors. At first, we thought about someone anonymous, but then your name came up. I blinked. What the hell are you talking about? Jason finally looked up. You remember a few years ago when you told me you were donating eggs for cash? My heart dropped. I remembered. It was a hard year. Rent was overdue, my car had died, and I didn't want to ask my parents for help again. I'd gone through the process quietly, desperate and a little numb. When I told Jason, it wasn't for advice. It was just something I let slip over a beer. They told me they discarded the badge, I said, almost in a whisper. I got a letter 6 months later saying it wasn't viable, that it was over. Chelsea shook her head slowly. It wasn't over, Jason continued. I knew someone at the clinic. He pulled some strings. When you signed the paperwork, you left some options open. I never thought we'd use them, but when the time came, and when we saw your profile listed, my throat went dry. You used my egg? I asked. My voice wasn't angry yet, just hollow. You're not the mother, my mom snapped. Like that settled it? You donated. That's a legal agreement. This is their child, not yours. But I couldn't stop hearing Chelsea's words over and over again in my head. She wasn't supposed to know. They weren't going to tell me, ever. They were going to raise my biological child, my DNA, my blood, and let me come to baby showers and smile politely while I brought them Target gift cards and tiny socks. And I never would have known if that nurse hadn't walked in with that folder. For the first time that night, I wasn't invisible, and they were terrified. Good. The dining table was still set. Untouched plates cooling while the candles flickered between untouched rolls and melting butter, but nobody was eating now. My mom sat rigid, her lips pinched so tightly that her mouth had all but vanished, and Jason paced the corner of the room like a man who had just locked his keys inside a burning car. Chelsea was the only one who still hadn't stood up from the table, and honestly, I don't think she could have if she'd tried. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the arms of her chair, and her breath came in shaky little pulls like someone trying very hard not to cry, or vomit, or both. I wasn't saying anything yet. I just stood there, leaning against the sideboard with my arms crossed, and the manila folder still cradled in one hand, not even bothering to hide the label anymore. There was no more pretending. The ultrasound, the medical report, the use of my biological material without my knowledge, all of it hung in the air like the stench of something rotting under the floorboards, something everyone had known about but refused to acknowledge until it wriggled up through the cracks and bled out into the carpet. You used my egg, I repeated finally, slower this time, not because I needed clarification, but because I wanted to hear them say it again, out loud, in front of everyone. Chelsea nodded, and the tiny movement looked like it cost her something. Yes, she said quietly, her eyes darting to my mother like she was hoping for a lifeline that wasn't coming. But it was only because we were desperate. Jason and I had been trying for so long, nothing was working, and we didn't want to use a complete stranger. We wanted someone we trusted, someone we loved. That word sat wrong in my chest. Loved. If this was love, then I couldn't imagine what betrayal looked like. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. We didn't think it would matter. You said they discarded the eggs. We thought that meant you wouldn't care. You wouldn't even know. You thought it wouldn't matter if you created a child using my body, my genetics, my goddamn blood, as long as I didn't find out. I couldn't stop the tremble in my voice now, and I didn't try. What kind of people are you? We're your family, my mom said sharply, rising to her feet now like she was ready to steer the conversation in a direction that suited her better. And this child, their child, is a blessing, a miracle. If anything, you should be proud that something of yours is helping create life in this family. I stared at her. Proud? You think I should be proud of being used? No one used you, she snapped, though her voice lacked conviction. You donated, Hannah. You signed papers. You took money. That's not victimhood. That's a transaction. My stomach turned at her words. It wasn't just what she was saying, it was how easily she said it, how quickly she turned it into something cold and legal and transactional, as if I had signed away my right to feel anything, to be anything other than a bystander to my own biology. I was broke, I said, my voice tightening. I was 28 and drowning in debt, and I was told the eggs were no good, that they were destroyed. I never would have done it if I thought they'd be sitting in a clinic freezer, waiting for my brother and his wife to come along and pick one out like a damn casserole. Jason stepped forward, trying again to play peacekeeper, his hands raised slightly. We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought this would bring us closer. By stealing from me? I asked. Chelsea winced. It wasn't theft. It was complicated. No, it wasn't complicated. It was cowardly. What was complicated about telling me the truth? About treating me like a human being instead of a means to an end? I glanced down at the ultrasound photo again and felt something unfamiliar stir inside me. I don't know what it was. Anger, grief, shock, maybe all of it. But it curled hot in my stomach and settled in my chest like an anchor. There it was, a little life, part Jason, part Chelsea, but undeniably part me. And they weren't going to tell me, ever. I would have bought tiny outfits and plastic toys for a baby they called theirs. And I would have smiled through every moment, never knowing I was handing pieces of myself away with every ribbon-wrapped gift. You didn't even think I had the right to know, I said, quieter now, the rage dulling into something colder, sharper. You were just going to pretend this child had nothing to do with me. You were going to let me be the crazy aunt with no kids and too many cats, while my child called you Mom, and I stood in the background clapping. You're not her mother, Chelsea said then, not cruelly but firmly. Legally, emotionally, practically, you're not. I am. My mother nodded beside her like a lawyer stamping a document. That's exactly right. You were a donor. They are the parents. End of story. But it wasn't the end of the story. Not by a long shot. Not with the way Jason was avoiding my eyes. Not with the way Chelsea's fingers trembled against her water glass. There were more layers here, more lies waiting beneath the surface. And if they thought I was going to walk away quietly, they clearly didn't know me as well as they thought they did. I looked around the table, at the mess of napkins and forgotten congratulations, at the glistening roast and the untouched salad, and the wilted centerpiece my mom had no doubt spent hours arranging. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like clarity. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could cut me out of my own bloodline, rewrite the script so cleanly that I'd never even suspect I'd been edited out. But they forgot one thing. I was the one with the folder now, and I was done playing the quiet one. I pushed away from the sideboard, tucking the ultrasound back inside the envelope and sliding it beneath my coat. I smiled, just a little, and let my gaze rest on each of them in turn. You're right, I said. This isn't my baby, not yet. But if you think I'm just going to let this slide, you don't know me at all. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't throw a drink. I didn't cry in the driveway. I just walked to my car with my heart pounding and my mind already 10 steps ahead. If they wanted silence, they should have picked a different sister. Because now it was war. By the time I reached my apartment that night, the streets had gone dark and quiet, blanketed in that strange stillness that only comes after something inside you has shifted so permanently, so violently, that nothing outside can touch it. I didn't turn on the TV, I didn't check my phone, though it buzzed twice with Jason's name, and once from my mother. Her message, no doubt some tightly wrapped version of damage control, something like, "Let's all cool off, or we can fix this privately." But there was nothing left to fix. Not in the way they meant. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, every conversation from the dinner playing back in fragments. Chelsea's trembling voice, Jason's silence, my mother's surgical coldness, cutting through morality with legalese like she had a gavel in her purse. I couldn't stop thinking about the way they looked at me, as if I was the one crossing a line, as if I had no right to feel betrayed, no right to demand answers. They had taken my DNA, my blood, my biology. They had twisted it into a narrative that suited them, packaged it into a clean, convenient miracle, and all the while they had planned to keep me smiling on the sidelines, no more significant than the florist at their baby shower. That's when the thought hit me, simple, sharp, and electric. The baby shower. Chelsea had mentioned it briefly that night, back when the champagne had been flowing and the family was still basking in the glow of their perfect little announcement. It was planned for 3 weeks out, at the same country club where Jason had proposed. White tablecloths, gourmet catering, pastel decorations, and no doubt a Pinterest board full of themed signage and color-coordinated diaper cakes. It was exactly the kind of place they felt comfortable, public enough to be performative, curated enough to hide anything messy. They were going to celebrate their baby with smiling faces and polite laughter, all while knowing what they had done, that I knew and that I wasn't part of it. That was the plan. Mine would be different. I didn't want chaos. I didn't want to scream or cry or throw myself across the dessert table in a theatrical protest. I didn't want to be dismissed as irrational or jealous or any of the lazy labels people throw at women who finally stop swallowing what's shoved down their throats. No, I wanted precision. I wanted quiet, brutal revenge. Something that would leave a mark not just on their reputation, but on their comfort. I wanted them to sweat beneath those pastel decorations. I wanted them to remember, with every bite of petit four and every clap of congratulations, that I hadn't forgotten. So I made a plan. First, I ordered a DNA testing kit. Not one of those novelty ancestry kits people give their dads on Father's Day, but a clinical-grade paternity and maternity test. It wasn't hard. I just had to say I needed proof of biological material for legal documentation. They didn't ask questions. Then I called the clinic, the same one where I had donated my eggs nearly 7 years ago. I didn't accuse anyone outright. I simply asked for a copy of my file, full medical records, every signature and note attached to my donation. When the paperwork arrived, I spent an entire Saturday flipping through page after page of fine print, looking for one thing, proof that I had never agreed to known recipients. And there it was, line 32, subsection 3. I had signed off on anonymous use only. That meant they had either lied to the clinic about their identity, or someone inside had looked the other way. Either way, someone had broken protocol. And I was going to use it. I made copies, scanned files, recorded a voicemail of myself reading the section aloud, just in case someone decided to deny it later. And then I did what any woman raised in a family like mine learns to do: smile sweetly, press the hem of my anger, and sew it into something wearable. I reached out to Chelsea's sister, the one who lived in Scottsdale, and ran a wellness Instagram, where she posted daily about gratitude and clean eating. I told her I'd be attending the shower and asked if I could help coordinate a special surprise. Something heartfelt, something touching, something that honored motherhood in all its forms. She loved the idea. Next, I ordered a custom shirt. It was plain white, soft cotton, the kind you could tuck into jeans and wear with a grin. Across the front, printed in pink letters with a tiny cartoon stork underneath, it said, "You're welcome, Chelsea." 3 days before the shower, I mailed anonymous envelopes. One went to Chelsea's parents, high society types who owned 3 homes and an imported dog, containing a typed letter that outlined, very politely, the biological truth about their future grandchild. No rage, no accusations, just facts. Another went to Jason's HR department. Nothing scandalous, just a detailed account of how he had possibly misused confidential family medical information and may have coerced medical professionals to retrieve biologically sensitive material. The third went to my mother. That one was handwritten. No signature, just the words, "You raised one golden child. Turns out, the one you ignored is the one carrying your blood forward." The day of the shower arrived sunny and smug. The country club was decked out like a movie set. Balloons floated in gentle clusters, waiters in white gloves passed hors d'oeuvres, and every corner of the room buzzed with clean, well-dressed guests, who all smelled like expensive perfume and mild self-congratulation. Chelsea stood near the center, glowing and radiant, her dress tight around her growing belly, Jason at her side playing the picture-perfect husband. And then I walked in. I wore the shirt under a light cardigan, which I didn't remove until people had already started to notice me. One by one, heads turned, eyes narrowed. Chelsea's mother gasped audibly. Jason's shoulders tensed so hard you'd think someone had just whispered lawsuit into his ear. But I didn't cause a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked up to Chelsea, handed her a gift bag, and smiled. Inside the bag was a framed copy of the Ultrasound, the one the nurse had handed me, the one with my name on it. Chelsea looked into the bag, then up at me. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice sharp and shaking. "Just giving you what's yours," I said, leaning in close, "and reminding you what's mine." She started to say something, but I stepped back before she could finish. I didn't need applause. I didn't need witnesses. I only needed her to know that I wasn't going anywhere, that I wasn't going to let them write me out of the story. And the best part, I hadn't even begun. The silence that followed my exit from the baby shower was not the kind that settles after something has been said and understood. It was the kind of silence that crackles underneath the skin, like electricity before a storm, full of unsaid things that no one dares to voice because the truth, once spoken, cannot be unsaid, cannot be unlearned, cannot be tucked back into the polite folds of family illusion. I did not look back when I walked out. I did not wait for someone to chase after me or beg for understanding or offer an apology that would only exist to smooth things over rather than admit to the magnitude of what had been done. I drove home with the windows down, not because the air felt good, but because I needed to feel something, anything, other than the tight coil of fury and satisfaction warring in my chest. The fallout began before I even reached my front door. My phone lit up with calls and messages. Jason's number appeared first, followed by several from Chelsea's sister, then finally from my mother, whose text read only, "Are you happy now?" There was no punctuation, no greeting, not even a signature, just 5 words carrying more venom than an entire courtroom testimony. I didn't reply. Not then, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I knew what silence did to people like her. I knew how it unraveled her sense of control. I knew she'd sit there, staring at the screen, cursing the one daughter she never really understood, the one she never bothered to ask about unless it was to complain, correct, or compare. I poured a glass of wine, sat on my couch, and let the messages pile up. Some were angry, some panicked. A few tried to disguise outrageous concern, asking if I was doing okay, or ready to talk this out. But all of them circled the same desperate orbit, an urgent need to pull the narrative back into their hands. They still thought they could control how the story was told. They still thought, despite everything, that I could be handled. It wasn't until 2 days later that Jason showed up at my door. He didn't call first. He just knocked, like we were still those siblings who used to share secrets over cheap beer on the roof of our parents' garage, back when we were still young enough to believe that family meant safety instead of hierarchy. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He stood there, pale and sleep-deprived, his hair messy and shirt untucked, looking like someone who had been running damage control nonstop since the moment I handed Chelsea that gift bag. "I didn't come to fight," he said, his voice hoarse. I just need to talk." I crossed my arms but didn't shut the door. "Then talk." He hesitated, glancing at the hallway behind me like he half expected our mother to appear from the shadows. You were right about everything, about what we did, how we went about it. I don't have a defense. I was scared. We were both scared. Chelsea was spiraling, and You thought I wouldn't matter, Aunt, I interrupted, not harshly, but with the kind of clarity that cuts clean. You thought I would stay quiet. You thought at most it would sting a little, but I get over it because that's what I always do, right? I get over things. I swallow things. I disappear. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. We didn't mean to erase you, he said, but I see now that we did. I studied him for a moment, and for the first time since this entire mess had begun, I saw my brother, not the man who stood at the center of every family portrait, not the golden child or the charming husband-to-be, but the boy who once protected me from bullies and held my hand during thunderstorms. That boy was still there, just older, broken in places I hadn't noticed until now. I'm not looking to raise your child, I said finally. This isn't about custody or some dramatic legal move. I'm not going to sue anyone. But don't mistake my silence for surrender. I'm not disappearing. I'm not going to pretend that baby isn't part of me. You don't get to write me out of her story. Jason nodded, slowly, like each word was a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. What do you want? That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? A part of me had imagined this moment so many times, had pictured some neat resolution. Something that ended with apologies and maybe a shared photo album. But standing there, looking into his face, I realized that there wasn't going to be a clean ending. What had been broken couldn't be fixed with a confession or a bouquet. There would always be a crack between us now, a hairline fracture that widened every time they pretended I was nothing more than a donor. I want the truth to live where the lies tried to bury me, I said. That's all. He left without another word, and I didn't watch him go. I didn't need to. I knew that whatever came next would be slow, uneven, uncertain, but it would be mine. The next week passed in quiet waves. Chelsea never called. My mother sent one final message, another cold sentence with no greeting. I hope you're proud of yourself. This time, I responded, I am. Weeks later, the photos from the baby shower were still circulating on social media, mostly from Chelsea's side, carefully edited, professionally staged, all of them bright and perfect except one. One photo, posted by a distant cousin and quickly deleted, showed the exact moment Chelsea opened my gift. Her smile faltered, her hands froze mid-unwrapping, and standing in the background was me, wearing that white shirt, smirking just slightly, the text across my chest clear as crystal. You're welcome, Chelsea. It became a meme in certain circles. A cousin of a cousin sent it to me without realizing the context. I saved it. Not out of vanity, but as a reminder. A reminder that I didn't have to scream to be heard. That I didn't have to set fire to the family tree. I just had to stop watering it. Months later, when the baby was born, I didn't visit. I didn't send flowers. But I did send a card, unsigned, no return address. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in dark blue ink. The real celebration was never yours, and I meant it.